centers, and the resources and tools available to support you in meeting your disability-related obligations. Second, leading corporations throughout the world are finding considerable value in making their workplaces more inclusive of people with disabilities. So I'll encourage you throughout the presentation to go beyond compliance to ensure your workplace is inclusive of all people, including those with disabilities. And third, we very much would like to hear of your challenges, as well as your ideas for developing new policy and practice tools to overcome the challenges that you face. But before we begin the presentation, note that we'll be using the Teams chat feature to take questions and receive policy ideas from the audience. Please be aware, if you do use the chat function, that this is a group forum and all attendees can view the chat conversations. Given that the group format, and in order to limit disruptions, we ask that you hold all chats until we announce the question and answer period at the very end of the presentation. Please understand that due to time constraints, it may not be possible for us to answer all questions received in the chat today. At the end of the slide deck, I provide my contact information. Please feel free to send any unanswered questions to my email, and I'll get back with you as soon as I'm able. Please also feel free to contact me with any policy or practice ideas that you may have. So in case you're not familiar with the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, otherwise known as ODEP, our mission is to develop and influence policies that increase the number and quantity of employment opportunities for people with disabilities. In order to develop and promote disability employment-related policies and practices, ODEP funds 3 employer-facing policy development and technical assistance centers. And you'll learn about those in a few minutes. As a non-regulatory federal agency promoting policies to increase workplace success for people with disabilities, ODEP is in a very unique position to hear from you what is working for you and what's not working. And when we then have the responsibility to coordinate and influence the work, both internally with DOL, for example, with the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, as well as externally with other government agencies, nonprofits, employers, and employer groups, looking to create or amplify policy and practice solutions that work. Managing people with disabilities throughout the employee life cycle need not be difficult or complicated, but it starts by recognizing and understanding the value that people with disabilities bring to the workplace. And we all know inclusion is not without challenges, particularly at first. However, providing equal opportunities to people with disabilities is a win-win-win for the individual, the employer, and society. I really think to understand our mission and why disability inclusion matters, one has to understand the enormous potential of this talent pool of people with disabilities. While self-evident to some of us, many other people do not think really about how disability crosses all the disability dimensions like gender, race, age, and religion. In all, we're talking about 30.4 million people of working age who report a disability. 20 million of these folks are younger people who grew up post-ADA and are typically empowered by their disability. And they're entering our workplaces with increasing numbers. And it's important to note, too, that most people with disabilities in our workplace have acquired their disability. So think of your CEO who's had a heart attack, or your vice president of marketing who has diabetes, or your associate who has anxiety disorder. All of these folks in your workforce have disabilities. It's important to know that many of these people are new to the disability world and may not be familiar with the accommodation process. Thus, educating your workforce is therefore key towards developing that more inclusive workplace culture. Even outside of these staggering numbers that I just provided, there's a strong business case for hiring and retaining workers with disabilities. In the 2018 American Institutes for Research report, A Hidden Market, the Purchasing Power of People with Disabilities, the authors write, First, businesses benefit from hiring people with disabilities by increasing the diversity of their labor force, inspiring innovation and improving productivity. Second, they benefit from an increase in favorable public perception. And lastly, people with disabilities represent a vast consumer market for high quality services and products. And according to the 2018 Accenture report, companies identified as leaders in this disability inclusion space, companies participating in Disability:IN's Disability Equality Index, had on average over a 4-year period 28% higher revenues, double the net income, and 30% higher economic profit margins than their counterparts not on this list of the Disability Equality Index. It's important for all of us as we try to work and to create more disability inclusive workplaces that by hiring more people with disabilities, we can boost the GDP $25 billion if just 1% of people with disabilities join the labor force. And with all the members of your workforce, focusing on developing your employees with disabilities results in innovation, increased efficiency, and higher productivity. Creating inclusive workplaces does take a bit of work, but know that we here at ODEP are continually committed to supporting companies and others to meet their workplace needs and inclusion goals. We help employers in many ways, but in particular, we have the tools to support you with inclusive recruitment, increasing your self-identification rates, and developing your accommodation infrastructure, including best and emerging policies and practices. Now, let me tell you more about our 3 employer-focused technical assistance centers and the various tools and resources they provide to support your ADA and Section 503 and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act compliance obligations. And ultimately, they support your disability inclusion journey. Let's begin with EARN, or the Employee Assistance Resource Network on Disability Inclusion, a free resource offering information and resources to empower individuals and organizations to become leaders in the employment and the advancement of people with disabilities. EARN provides assistance through its self-service portal, as well as a range of educational and outreach activities. On the slide, there's a graphic of the EARN website. Featured on the center of the site is the National Disability Employment Awareness Month theme of increasing access and opportunity, celebrating 30 years of the ADA and 75 years of NDEAM. Then there's a banner stating, "Don't know where to start? We'll guide you." And finally, at the bottom of the website graphic, we see 6 information portals with topics on topics of such recruiting, laws and regulations, mentoring, creating an accessible workplace, federal contract requirements, and federal and state employment. One of our most recent resources at EARN, and it's available at askearn.org, is the COVID-19 Emerging Practices to Employ and Protect Workers. On the screen, there's a graphic of the front cover of the document and a photo of an employee taking the temperature of another employee who is entering the workplace. Both employees are wearing masks. Bobby Silverstein, the architect of the ADA, within the document concisely examines the intersectionality of the ADA and COVID, detailing some of the best practices for understanding obligations to accommodate workers during this COVID pandemic. This EARN publication provides practical information and answers such as, what do I do if I'm having difficulty obtaining medical information from an employee who has disclosed and requested accommodation? Or if I provide telework as an accommodation during COVID, am I locked into teleworking arrangement once I'm returning my workers back to the physical work site? So these are some of the questions that are answered in this new publication. Next, we're presented with a graphic of the EARN Mental Health Toolkit. While this was rolled out a few years ago now, with the impacts of COVID-19, it's more relevant than ever. EARN's Mental Health Toolkit, pictured on the screen, presents an easy-to-follow framework for fostering a mental health-friendly workplace, all built around the 4 A's: awareness, accommodations, assistance, and access. At the bottom, we offer the website address, askearn.org/mental health. You can access it as simple as that. The toolkit really provides a gateway to background, tools, and resources that can help employers learn more about mental health issues, as well as cultivate a welcoming and supportive work environment for employees who may be facing mental health issues. Within the toolkit, too, we have a number of promising practices, providing access to mental health screening tool, providing easy employee access to mental health support through your employee assistance program, and including information about mental health issues regularly to the entire workforce in order to reduce the stigma sometimes associated with the mental health conditions. We talk about each of those issues within the toolkit. The toolkit too has stories from a number of corporations who have innovated in this area. EARN also provides another self-service tool called the Inclusion at Work Framework. Developed with input from a range of employers known for disability inclusion, the Inclusion at Work Framework is an internationally award-winning multimedia policy tool that outlines 7 core components of a disability inclusive workplace, along with a menu of strategies for achieving them. On the screen, we see a circular Inclusion at Work framework for building an inclusive organization, with 7 core elements, including lead the way to build an inclusive culture, building the pipeline, hire and keep the best, ensure productivity, communicate policies and procedures, be tech savvy, and measure success. A disability inclusive workplace is a compliant workplace, ensuring opportunity and access for people with disabilities throughout the employee life cycle results in a disability inclusive workplace that is also compliant. This Inclusion at Work framework can assist you in building out your inclusion strategic plan and prioritizing your initiatives. For those of you who are contractors with the federal government and obligated to meet the requirements of Section 503, you may find value in EARN's guide in engaging employees to measure success, innovative approaches to encouraging self-identification of disability. On the screen, we see a graphic of the cover of the publication, the title, Engaging Employees to Measure Success. This guide provides ideas for how to counter what research has shown to be the main barriers to self-identification. It also includes examples of approaches some businesses have used to increase self-identification rates and tracking results in your progress. The guide was published by EARN and ODEP in collaboration with our alliance partner, the National Industry Liaison Group, or more commonly known as NILG. For many companies, the accommodation process, or the interactive process we call it, is disjointed, reactive, and inconsistent really across lines of business. This may result in lower retention rates, increased hiring and training costs, and the loss of highly qualified talent and that institutional knowledge that they have. So whether you need help with the individual accommodation request or help implementing a successful accommodation program, our job accommodation network is there to support your company. JAN's really the leading source of free, expert, and confidential guidance on workplace accommodations and disability employment issues. On the screen, we have a graphic of the askjan.org website. In the center of the page, there's a question. Have questions about workplace accommodations or the Americans with Disabilities Act? Ask us, we can help. One can also see across the top website banner tools such as the Disability A to Z, which is very popular for JAN users, the ADA Library, Accommodation Search, publications, training, and referral resources. Jan's trusted consultants offer one-on-one guidance on workplace accommodations, the ADA and related legislation, and self-employment and entrepreneurship options for people with disabilities. Assistance is available through its online chat, via email, social networks, and once COVID has run its course, I expect that one will once again be able to reach Jan via its 800 number. Those who can benefit from Jan services include private employers of all sizes, government agencies, employee representatives and service providers, as well as people with disabilities, their family and advocates. One of Jan's latest resources in the Workplace Accommodation Tool is the Workplace Accommodation Toolkit. It too is a self-service portal, much as the other the other tools of Earn, for instance. So on the screen, we see a graphic of a toolkit, open to reveal all of its tools, and a description of the toolkit, which reads, Jan's Accommodation Toolkit is a free, comprehensive online resource for employers seeking to move beyond basic compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act in order to create a more disability-inclusive workplace. The toolkit provides guidance and resources for developing and updating accommodation policies and processes while leveraging the best proven practices available to date. The toolkit contains actionable accommodation policies and processes from leading U.S. businesses, a suite of accommodation forms, training presentations, and role-play videos modeling inclusive behaviors. The toolkit also includes best and emerging practices for creating an inclusive workplace for people with disabilities during all phases of the employee life cycle. Within the toolkit, one can find resource drawers for recruiters and hiring managers, supervisors and managers, internal reasonable accommodation subject matter experts, SMEs, consultants, information technology team members, and employees with disabilities and their allies. Overall, the goal of the toolkit is really to provide resources for creating exemplary organizational accommodation infrastructure, thereby ensuring a disability-inclusive workplace. The toolkit provides resources to support organizational efforts to accommodate applicants, candidates, and employees with disabilities, to train those serving in roles critical to managing disability, and to promote disability inclusion throughout the workplace. Within the toolkit, Jan has produced a number of videos featuring the interactive process. And these are all, as I described in the last slide, are all role-based according to what your role is within the organization. So on the screen, we see a graphic of an HR associate interviewing a young man on the autism spectrum. These videos include scenarios in multiple industries with people of varying disabilities during all phases of the employee's life cycle. Each scenario culminates in a solution to the accommodation situation highlighted. Videos showing the accommodations and solutions are accompanied by a slide presentation providing salient learning tools from each of the videos. We have a number of videos that are featured, including hiring an individual with anxiety and a stuttering disorder, managing the performance of a person with a non-apparent disability, returning an individual to work who has had a back injury, retaining an individual with chronic health conditions, advancing an individual who's deaf, and one of the latest is the how to manage an employee who has a substance abuse disorder. So how do you manage their performance and conduct management performance appraisals with someone who has a substance abuse disorder? Another quick and easy tool of Jan's is the A to Z of disabilities, an accommodation search engine. By using this tool, one can search by disability, limitation, by work-related function, topic, or by accommodation. On the screen, we see a screenshot of the A to Z of disabilities and accommodation search engine. This self-service tool allows the user to drill down very quickly into what accommodations and tools for specific disabilities in various business settings. The third employer-facing ODEP Technical Assistance Center for helping to ensure an inclusive and compliant workplace is PeteWorks.org. PeteWorks fosters collaborations that make emerging technologies accessible and support workplaces in using inclusive technologies that engage the skills of employees with disabilities. On the screen, we see a graphic representing their website resources. In the center of the screen, we see the accessibility playbook for emerging technology initiatives. Across the top, we see the header containing categories of tools, including the future of work, digital accessibility toolkit, and the policy and workforce development. In this time of COVID, many employers and employees have recently shifted to telework. Pete can help with that transition to ensure your digital communications and platforms are accessible as possible for everyone, including people with disabilities, with such tools as tips for creating accessible digital communications, resources for employees with disabilities, resources for recruiting and hiring professionals, and tips for communicating your commitment to accessibility. All of these can be found at peteworks.org/futureofwork/A11Y/telework. According to a survey of people with disabilities conducted by Pete, 46% of respondents with disabilities rated their last experience applying for a job online as, quote, difficult to impossible. And that matters because if your technology is limiting your pool of applicants, you'll be missing out on potentially great hires and, of course, potentially exposing yourself to a lot of legal risk. And that's what really we're talking about today, right? Limiting risk, making sure your workplace is compliant. On the screen, we see a graphic showing the web page for this tool, and we see the title, Talent Works, Accessible Recruiting for Employers. This tool explores three main categories of e-recruiting: talent sourcing, online applications, and pre-employment testing. Each sector features videos, tip sheets, examples of common accessibility issues, and of course, solutions for fixing those issues. Pete also provides training resources on accessibility issues in your workplace. On this graphic from the website, we see all of Pete's training resources. Success at including people with disabilities can only happen if staff across your organization have an understanding of accessibility practices. For example, if you implement a policy requiring that all company documents in PDFs are made accessible, then you need to train employees on what that means and why it's important. Similarly, if you instruct your web developers to make sure that your website is accessible, they may or may not know what that means. And where Pete's training and professional development come into play is using these staff training resources. You can adapt them or you can download them wholesalely in order to train your staff. And finally, one of the last resources that I want to talk about in terms of peteworks.org is ensuring the procurement of accessible technology. It's really imperative that you are familiar with accessible technology and you know how to procure that. By procuring accessible technology, you'll really ensure that you have an inclusive workplace. Pete also has a number of other resources to ensure workplace technology is accessible, usable by people with disabilities. So one of the tools that we're looking at here in the graphic on the screen is Pete's Buy It. And it's an online resource that helps employers and their purchasing staff build accessibility and usability into their information and communication procurement processes. This tool really ensures that the ICT that you buy and implement works for anyone, including employees, job seekers, and customers with disabilities. And as we end as we come near to the end of the presentation, I wanted to remind you about the National Disability Employment Awareness Month, or NDEM, which I mentioned earlier. This year is the 75th anniversary of NDEM, which, when combined with the 30th anniversary of the ADA, means it's really exciting year for all of us who work on this issue. As all of us know every day, people with disabilities can and do add value to Americans' workplaces and economy. They add value to your companies and to your clients. During NDEM, we celebrate the contributions of all of these workers with disabilities. We also reaffirm our commitment to ensuring all Americans, including Americans with disabilities, can gain skills and put them back to work after COVID for the benefit of ourselves, their families, their employers, and their communities, and our nation's economy. Employers are highly encouraged to recognize NDEM, and we have a list of ideas that you can find on our website. But really, there's no end to the ways that companies can participate in or support NDEM. And if you're looking for videos or other materials for supporting your inclusion journey or to support your NDEM efforts, please access the ODEP-funded outreach effort to promote the hiring, retention, and advancement of people with disabilities, the Campaign for Disability Employment. The CDE is a collaborative of several leading disability and business organizations convened by ODEP to work together to address disability employment. The outcome of this collaboration is a national outreach initiative entitled What You Can Do, or What Can You Do, sorry. Framed around messages developed collectively by the CDE's members, the initiative challenges common misperceptions about disability employment and encourages really all employers and others to recognize the value and the talent of people with disabilities and what they really bring to American workplaces and the economy. Key public service announcements of the What Can You Do initiative are pictured here on the screen and include Working Works, Who Am I, Because, and I Can. Each of these PSAs highlight what people with disabilities can do if given the opportunity. The CDE has developed outreach materials that complement the PSAs, including posters, discussion guides created for coworkers, youth, healthcare professionals, and other audiences. Spanish language versions of selected materials are also available. And the final ODEP resource that I really wanted to share with you is a newer PSA featuring professional baseball athlete trainers talking about the importance of mental health friendly workplaces. Pictured here on a screenshot from the website is the PSA. And the PSA is really a result of the alliance between ODEP and the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainers Association. So now please use the chat box for your questions and also just give me a second to provide some of these. And do note, as I noted in the beginning of the presentation, that we do not expect to get to all these questions, but we will capture them. And we have a list of participants and we'll be sure to answer all of the questions and send them to the participants. So please feel free at any time to propose your ideas and ask questions. You can use my email address if you're not comfortable with asking your question or proposing your idea today. So on the screen, you see my email address, which is orceline.lewis.e@dol.gov. All right, so that's the end of our slideshow presentation. Now, I was hoping that we could engage and really start to talk about some of the questions that you have in terms of disability inclusion, your compliance responsibilities under the ADA, Section 503, 508. And if you could just give me 1 second here, I will get to those emails. Okay, so the first one is one of those questions that we should all be prepared for. Will your slides be shared? The person does provide their email address, and yeah, and absolutely, we can send out all of the slides, the PowerPoint presentation, to all of you, no problem at all. Okay, our next question really has to do with the EDI award. And can you explain the application process? So many of you may be aware that PepsiCo and CVS are our EDI winners from last year. And this award is given to those exemplary organizations that are really showing how they've created inclusive workplaces. So we're currently working with CVS and with PepsiCo to develop a slate of activities throughout this year so that we can tout their great work and also elevate their brand a bit for engaging with us and being willing to engage in this EDI award. Now, we are not sure yet whether there is going to be an EDI award for next year. As we all know, we're in an election year. So we are certainly hoping that we would continue that award, but it may be called something else next year. But we will be moving forward again with PepsiCo and CVS in their year of engagement to celebrate their accomplishments and hopefully disseminate, promote, and replicate the practices that they've created through other workplaces. So I would say just stay posted on that and just see where we are after the election and whether the EDI award is going to be an option again for next year. All right, another question. Let me read it first and then I'll be with you in a second. Okay, so the question is, if leaders of a company are resistant to including people with disabilities in their strategic staffing plans, what guidance would you provide recruiters and HR professionals to address this? Well, two things really. I have seen inclusion start at various levels of the organization. Sometimes I've seen it start in return to work. There is a recognition in workers' comp and return to work division that there's promising practices that we have, and we can start to creating inclusion and have it replicated throughout the organization. I've also seen it started by recruiters and HR professionals, and this is just making sure that you're partnering when you are recruiting, that you're partnering with organizations, nonprofits, right, that support individuals with disabilities. So if you start there, then you can build it out from there, and you can find some successes, tout those successes, build on those successes, and then hopefully sell the VP suite and the CEO suite. But if you really want to take another route, then I think it's really important that, where we began today is with a bit of persuasion, right? Just in case you were still thinking that, what's the return on investment, or why should I do this? Why disability inclusion amongst the many other things that I have to do, right? We talked about the incredibly large talent pool. We talked about the Accenture report, the AIR report. So what I would do is I would look at these business case research, and I would put together an internal business case. And then I would ask for some time of the CEO or somebody from the VP suite. And if I were going to do that, I would do some research. I would find out who in the VP suite or the C-suite has a son or daughter with autism, a nephew or a niece with a disability, a sibling with a disability. And so what I would try to do is identify that champion, and then that's who I would approach with my internal business case that I've put together, and try to find support. It's just, having a champion at the top is not the be all and end all. Certainly not. You need the infrastructure in place in order to normalize your processes and for you to become fully inclusive. But it's really important that you have a champion so that they can be the champion in the C-suite. But then also, whenever you get into a log jam with other divisions or departments, that's a person that can step in and say, no, we've invested in this, we've decided we're doing this and we need to move forward with it, and they create that. So I think there's a number of different ways that you as a recruiter or an HR professional, you can, like I said, start at your level, start building from your level, or really start to develop that business case and present that if you have that opportunity. What resources, the next question, are available for posting open positions? I'm looking for URL addresses. So if you go to the Job Accommodation Network, and you know what, I'm not going to be able to give the exact URL, but they have a tool called Finding a Job That's Right for You. And they have all of the job banks that are available for people with disabilities. And so you can find a list, whether it's abilities or whether it's the Sierra Group or whether it's gettinghired.com. So there are a number of different tools and job banks that are available to you. So what I would suggest again is Jan and finding a job that's right for you. And there's 4 steps. There's 4 tools within that microsite. And within that, you can find all of the job banks. Or, if you can't find it there, please do my email again is on the last slide. Please do just send a message through, and I'll give you the direct URL to make it really easy. Okay, another question about the slides. So if they're not downloadable through Teams, then someone's asking, can we provide our email address for the slides? What I would say, you probably don't want to put your email in. Okay, so here's what to do. We're going to do it. If we're not able to send it to you directly, anyone who wants a copy of the slides, please email me. Again, last slide, email address. Just send it through to me and I'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides. They may be coming in other ways, but it's not something that we discussed or that I'm remembering that we discussed. So that gives us an option and a cover, and we'll, so you know where to access them. Just look at my email address at the end. All right, so let's see, next question. What should we do when an employee does not want to return to work after working remotely due to COVID? Well, again, what I would suggest is to look at that document at the EARN website, and that's going to give you a lot of answers there. I would also encourage you, if you have not already, if you are an employer, you should already be looking at the EEOC website, the Q&As that they've developed there for COVID. It's just absolutely excellent resources. The questions are right on. Right from employers, and the EEOC could not be more explicit in their replies. I really kudos for the EEOC for that document. So what I would suggest is entering in the interactive process. I mean, we don't know if that person has a disability, right? You haven't told me that they do. But what I would say is, hey, we're trying to support you in returning to work, right? That's the goal, is for us all to be back on the physical site. So what kind of supports do you need to stay at home? Why, what's the reason that you need to stay at home? And then, what they very well may do is be very forthcoming and reveal that they have some sort of disability. In that respect, you want to enter in the interactive process, and you want to start working through that interactive process. And ultimately see if that is possible, or if you can negotiate. So, your team meetings are on Wednesdays and Fridays, so that's really a time when they need to be in the office. So, as we know, the employer has every right to decide on the accommodation. But as we also know, it has to be effective for the individual with a disability. So when we're talking about returning someone, there very well may be other accommodations that are effective besides telework. But what we want to do is then explore those accommodations on site at the physical site. This person too may be just leery of coming back because they have a responsibility for a family member who has an immune system that's been compromised, right? So again, I would point you to Bobby Silverstein's excellent policy document that's on the EARN website, available through us, and that answers the questions. Certainly in terms of if one does have someone that is immune suppressed, or somebody just older, and you have this fear. Also, if somebody is pregnant, I mean, Bobby answers those questions within that policy document. So you'll definitely want to download that and look at that. But otherwise, I would say engage in the interactive process. Even though I don't know yet that it's a disability, I wouldn't bring up disability, but I would start to just say, what supports do you need? Let me understand this a bit better. What's the limitation of coming back to the workplace? Because depending upon their reply, then, again, hone in on the document that Bobby did, and then you'll understand, what OSHA is saying, and you'll understand what the CDE is saying in terms of protections. And then you'll also know what the intersectionality of ADA and and COVID are. So I would suggest really looking at that document. All right, any other questions that you may have? Now, what I'm also interested in is what has worked for you. For instance, I'm particularly interested now. My interest is piqued by this person who was asking about the Eddie Awards. So what kind of practice do you have that you had intended on submitting for the Eddie Award? I'm very interested in that, because this is the way that things happen. The more that we're informed about what's working and not working, what are your barriers to inclusion, then the better we will be at really establishing policy solutions and tools and resources in order to fill those gaps. So I'm kind of interested if that person is willing to share. All right, so sorry there. I didn't realize my screen was still being shared. But again, any policy suggestions or any particular barriers that you're facing in your workplace that you wanted to share with the Office of Disability Employment Policy, or again, the person who was talking about the Disability Inclusion Award, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe what your practice is that you were considering submitting? Or any other questions that you might have related to the Office of Disability Employment Policy or related to the EARN Technical Assistance Center, or with Jan or with Pete Works, any of the work that they're doing? Or again, any of the policy questions that you might have, or policy ideas that you might have. All right, I think then that we will wrap up today's session. I'm not sure if Maricela, if there are any final words, but I just want to appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to cover our technical assistance teams and show you all of the resources that are out there. And I'll just repeat again that, on the last slide, you can have my email address. And we will look at that one last time to make sure that if anyone wants to email me, that you'll be able to do that. So sorry for the technology glitches today. Practiced a number of times, but sometimes that just doesn't do it. So there's my email address. Again, I'll repeat it: orceline.lewis.e@dol.gov. If you have any questions that you didn't want to ask today of the group, but you want to ask me privately, please do. And again, please note that I'm always open to any policy suggestions or a conversation on some best practices that you believe might be replicable for other workplaces throughout the US. So with that, I think what we will do is we'll close. Maricela, just one last attempt. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the group?
Hi, Lou. I just wanted one for being part of this session. I apologize if there's echo. But this has been great. The questions have been wonderful. And Lou, Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much again.
Thanks very much. All right. So take care. Everybody have a great afternoon. Bye-bye now.